The rain hammered against Marie's Chicago apartment windows as another wave of excruciating pain crashed through her body. At 54, she pressed trembling hands against her temples, fighting nausea that had become her constant companion. 3 years of mysterious symptoms had reduced her life to a nightmare of doctor visits and dismissive medical opinions. The joint pain, crushing fatigue, unexplained rashes, and cognitive fog that made her forget words mid-sentence all dismissed as stress or aging by 7 different physicians. Dr. Patterson had actually suggested therapy for her health anxiety during their last visit. Sometimes our minds create physical symptoms when dealing with emotional stress. Have you considered that your recent divorce might be manifesting physically? The memory stung. Marie had walked out feeling smaller than ever, carrying the weight of medical gaslighting that so many women endured. Now, at 3 a.m., the pain was unbearable. Hours later, she was still shaking, still fighting agony that seemed to originate from her very bones. Marie stared at her phone, David's contact glowing on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the call button, trembling with weakness and hesitation. David was 32, a successful marketing executive living 20 minutes away, yet feeling like an ocean of distance separated them. Their relationship had soured since her divorce 2 years ago. David blamed her for leaving his father viewing her decision as selfish. He didn't understand the years of emotional neglect she'd endured, how his father had gradually eroded her self-worth. She pressed call before losing courage. "Mom, it's 3 a.m. What's wrong?" David's groggy voice carried immediate irritation. "David, I'm having another episode. The pain is really bad and I think I need to go to the emergency room." A heavy sigh. "Mom, we've been through this. You've been to the ER 3 times in 6 months and they never find anything. Maybe try that therapist Dr. Patterson recommended." The words hit like a physical blow. "David, I'm not making this up. Something is seriously wrong. I can barely stand. Look, I have an important presentation tomorrow. Can we talk about this later? Take some ibuprofen and get some sleep. Please, I'm scared. Could you just come over or meet me at the hospital?" The silence stretched endlessly before David finally spoke, his voice cold with barely controlled frustration. "Mom, honestly, I think you're doing this for attention. Ever since the divorce, you've had all these mysterious symptoms doctors can't find. It's like you want people to feel sorry for you. I can't keep dropping everything for these episodes." Marie felt the words physically impact her chest. "David, how can you say that? I'm your mother. I raised you. I would never what? Fake being sick for attention? To make Dad and me feel guilty about the divorce? The timing is pretty convenient." Tears streamed down her face, mixing physical pain with emotional agony that hurt even worse. "I can't believe you think I would do that. I don't know what to think anymore. If you were really sick, doctors would have found something by now. Maybe it's time you face the possibility that this is all in your head." The line went dead. Marie stared at her phone in stunned silence, rain continuing its assault on her. Windows her own son, the child she'd carried, raised with love and sacrifice, thought she was lying about being sick. She looked around her small apartment at pictures of David from childhood, his gap-toothed birthday grin, proud graduation, smile, the two of them laughing at a Cubs game 5 years ago. When had everything changed so drastically? Marie struggled to the bathroom mirror. I'm not making this up, but doubt began creeping in. 7 doctors found nothing wrong. Her ex-husband called her dramatic. Now her son thought she was faking illness for attention. Was everyone else right? The doubt lasted only moments before another surge of pain reminded her of the very real torment she experienced. This wasn't stress or emotional manipulation. This was something dangerous and real, and she was completely alone. Marie returned to her kitchen and pulled out her yellow legal pad, one of many, filled with detailed symptom documentation over 3 years. She'd started the journal after the 3rd dismissive doctor. 3rd, extreme fatigue. Couldn't get out of bed until 2 p.m. May 22nd. Fever of 101.3 lasted 2 days. A terrifying pattern emerged. Episodes were becoming more frequent and severe. Lost. Marie wrote. October 10th, severe abdominal pain, level 9/10. Called David for help. She stared at the stark words. She was seriously ill, getting worse daily, and the people who should support her had abandoned her when she needed them most. Tomorrow, she would call Dr. Patterson again and demand more tests. She would advocate for herself even if no one else would. She would fight for answers because she knew something was terribly wrong. What Marie didn't know was that time was running out faster than she could imagine. The mysterious illness slowly consuming her life was about to accelerate, and the answer she desperately sought would come too late to save her, but not too late to teach her son the most painful lesson of his life. 3 weeks after Marie's desperate phone call, the silence between mother and son had grown deafening. David threw himself into work at Morrison and Associates Marketing, using 60-hour weeks to shield against guilt that crept into quiet moments. His corner office on the 32nd floor offered spectacular views of Lake Michigan, but today's gray October sky mirrored his mood. Preparing for the Henderson account presentation, a multi-million-dollar campaign that could make his career, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. David, I finally got an appointment with a specialist at Northwestern. Dr. Reeves in rheumatology. Maybe she'll have answers. I miss you. David stared at the message before setting his phone aside without responding. He told himself he was protecting his sanity, that engaging would only encourage her behavior. But deep down, a small voice wondered if he was making a mistake. The Henderson presentation went exceptionally well. His Comfort Redefined campaign resonated with clients, and by 4 o'clock he had a signed $2.3 million contract. But as the office emptied and his professional high faded, thoughts of his mother returned. His phone rang, his father's name on the caller ID. Hey Dad. David, I hate to bother you, but your mother's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, called. She said Marie collapsed in her apartment hallway this morning and was taken to the hospital. David's stomach dropped. What? When? Is she okay? She saw paramedics carrying Marie out around 10 this morning. She looked unconscious. I thought you should know. Northwestern Memorial. David, I know things have been difficult, but maybe you should. I'll handle it, Dad. Part of him wanted to dismiss this as another attention-seeking episode, but neighbor. Witnesses made it harder to rationalize away. Northwestern Memorial's emergency department buzzed with controlled chaos. David approached the information desk where a tired nurse looked up from her computer. Room 314, 3rd floor. Follow signs to the medical wing. David's hands sweated as he walked hospital corridors. The antiseptic smell brought back memories of visiting his grandfather during his final illness. He'd been 12 then, and his mother had held his hand through these same halls, explaining Grandpa was very sick, but they needed to be brave. Room 314 was dimly lit with only a bedside lamp. Marie lay in the hospital bed looking smaller and more fragile than David had ever seen her. Her skin had a waxy yellowish tint, breathing seemed labored, and an IV line ran from her arm to a clear fluid bag. Mom, David's voice barely whispered. Marie's eyes fluttered open, and seeing him, a weak smile crossed her face. David, you came. Mrs. Chen called Dad. What did the doctors say? They're running more tests. Marie's voice was hoarse, each word requiring effort. Dr. Martinez in the ER said my blood work shows abnormalities, but they need comprehensive testing. David felt familiar frustration building. More tests. It's always more tests with you. The words came out harsher than intended, and he saw his mother flinch. David, please. I didn't ask to be here. I was getting my mail when everything went black. How convenient. You think I planned this? Made myself collapse in front of witnesses to prove a point? Somehow, no one can find anything definitively wrong. Because they haven't looked hard enough. Marie's voice rose, then broke into a coughing fit. David, I'm dying. I can feel it. My body is shutting down, and nobody will listen. You're not dying, Mom. You're 54. People your age don't randomly die from mysterious illnesses. Marie stared with an expression of heartbreak and disbelief. Do you remember when you were 8 and broke your arm falling off your bike? The sudden subject change caught David off guard. What does that have to do with anything? You were so brave at the hospital, but when we got home, you cried in my arms because you were scared the bone wouldn't heal right. Remember what I told you? David shifted uncomfortably. Mom, I don't see how I told you I would never let anything bad happen to you, that I would fight anyone who tried to hurt you, even doctors or teachers. I said believing in someone you love means trusting them even when you can't understand what they're going through. Tears streamed down Marie's face, but her voice remained steady. I need you to believe in me now, David, the way I believed in you when you were scared and hurt. Trust that I'm not lying about being sick. David felt something crack inside his chest but pushed the feeling away. That's different. I was a kid with a broken bone. You're an adult with ... whatever this is. With whatever this is, Marie repeated softly. Yes, that's exactly the problem. Nobody knows what this is, so nobody takes it seriously, including my own son. A nurse entered, checking monitors and making chart notes. Mrs. Coleman, Dr. Martinez would like to discuss your test results. Should I ask him to come in? Yes, please, Marie said, looking at David. Will you stay, please? David glanced at his watch, 7:30, and he had dinner plans with Jessica. But something in his mother's eyes made him nod reluctantly. Dr. Martinez was middle-aged with graying temples and a gentle demeanor. He pulled up a chair and opened Marie's chart. Mrs. Coleman, I've reviewed your blood work and medical history. There are some concerning patterns here. David's pulse quickened. What kind of patterns? Your mother's white blood cell count is elevated, and there are unusual markers suggesting an autoimmune process. Her liver enzymes are also significantly elevated, indicating systemic inflammation. Marie grabbed David's hand, her grip surprisingly weak. See, I told you something was wrong, Dr. Martinez continued. I'm not saying we have a diagnosis yet, but these results definitely warrant investigation. I'm referring you to Dr. Elizabeth Reeves in rheumatology. She specializes in autoimmune conditions. That's the appointment. I already scheduled, Marie said. Next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Excellent. Meanwhile, take it easy. No strenuous activity, and if you experience more episodes like this morning, come back immediately. After the doctor left, David sat in uncomfortable silence. The test results shook his certainty, but he wasn't ready to admit he might be wrong. I should go, he said finally. Jessica is waiting. Marie's face fell. Of course. I wouldn't want to keep you from your girlfriend. Mom, don't make this about Jessica. I'm glad doctors are taking you seriously now, but one blood test doesn't prove anything definitive. What would it take, David? Marie's voice was barely audible. What would I have to do to convince you I'm not faking this? David stood, unable to meet her eyes. I don't know. I honestly don't know. He walked toward the door, then paused without turning around. I'll call you after your appointment with Dr. Reeves. David, he turned back reluctantly. I love you. No matter what happens, I need you to know that. And I forgive you for not believing me. I understand why it's hard. David felt tears threatening but pushed them down. Get some rest, Mom. As he walked through hospital corridors, David's mind raced. The doctor's words echoed concerning patterns, autoimmune process, systemic inflammation. These weren't vague, dismissive responses his mother had been getting, but admitting he might be wrong would mean acknowledging he'd abandoned his mother during the worst period of her life. It would mean facing that his anger about the divorce had clouded his judgment. It would mean accepting he'd been cruel to someone genuinely suffering. David drove home through Chicago streets, city lights blurring as he struggled with suppressed emotions. Jessica waited at his apartment with tie, takeout, and wine, ready to celebrate his business victory. But walking through his front door, the earlier success felt hollow. You look terrible, Jessica said, setting down her wine glass. What happened? Did the Henderson meeting not go well? The meeting was fine. Great. Actually, we got the account. David slumped onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. My mother was in the hospital today. Jessica's expression softened. Oh no, is she okay? What happened? She collapsed at her apartment. The doctors say there might actually be something wrong with her this time. This time, Jessica sat beside him. David, what do you mean this time? For the first time in months, David found himself really explaining his mother's situation. As he described the years of symptoms, dismissive doctors, and his own doubts, he began hearing how it sounded from an outside perspective. Wait, Jessica interrupted. You've been thinking your mother was faking being sick for 3 years? You don't understand. She's been doctor shopping, always finding new symptoms. And the timing with the divorce? David, stop. Jessica's voice was firm. I've been a nurse for 8 years. Do you know how common it is for women to be dismissed by the medical system? Especially women going through major life changes. David stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe. Your mother hasn't been faking anything. Maybe she's been sick this whole time, and everyone, including you, has been too quick to dismiss her because it's easier than dealing with the reality that she might be seriously ill. The words hit David like a physical blow. You think I've been wrong about this? Jessica took his hand. I think you've been angry about your parents' divorce, and maybe that anger made it hard to see your mother clearly. But David, if she's been consistently sick for 3 years, and now doctors are finding abnormal results, that doesn't sound like someone faking it. David put his head in his hands. God, Jessica, what if you're right? What if I've been horrible to her when she needed me most? Then you figure out how to make it right, starting with believing her from now on. That night, David lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every conversation with his mother replayed in his mind, but now he heard them differently. Her requests for help sounded less like manipulation and more like genuine pleas from someone scared and alone. Her symptom descriptions sounded less like attention-seeking and more like desperate attempts to get someone to take her seriously. By morning, David had made a decision. He would go to his mother's appointment with Dr. Reeves. He would listen to what the specialist said, and he would start trying to rebuild the trust he'd shattered with his doubt and suspicion. What David didn't know was that Dr. Reeves would indeed have answers, but they would come far too late to undo the damage already done. Time was running out for Marie Coleman, and the reconciliation her son was planning would have to wait for a meeting neither could have anticipated. October's appointment, morning dawned crisp and clear, seeming to mock the gravity ahead. David had barely slept, his mind churning with Jessica's words and his growing awareness that he might have been catastrophically wrong about his mother's condition. He arrived at Marie's apartment at 9:15, giving them time for the 10 o'clock Northwestern Memorial appointment. When he knocked, it took several minutes for her to answer, and when she did, David was shocked by her appearance. In the week since her hospital visit, Marie seemed to have aged a decade. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath grayish skin. She moved slowly, gripping the doorframe for support, and David noticed her hands were trembling. "David, you came." Marie's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I wasn't sure I could do this alone." The drive to the hospital was mostly silent. David kept glancing at his mother, noticing details he'd missed before: how she gripped the armrest during turns, as if motion caused pain. The careful way she breathed, as if each breath required conscious effort. How she kept her eyes closed most of the journey, as if staying upright was exhausting. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves' office was in the medical professional building adjacent to Northwestern Memorial. The waiting room filled with patients of various ages, many displaying visible signs of chronic illness, joint deformities, mobility aids, the particular exhaustion that comes from fighting an invisible battle daily. Marie Coleman, a nurse, called after 20 minutes. Dr. Reeves was a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back neatly. Her office was lined with medical journals and certificates, but also personal touches, family photos, and a small garden of succulents, suggesting someone who understood the importance of nurturing life in small ways. "Mrs. Coleman, I've reviewed your medical history and blood work from your recent hospital visit," Dr. Reeves began, settling behind her desk with a thick file. "I also want to thank you for bringing your detailed symptom journal. It's incredibly helpful to have such thorough documentation." Marie reached for David's hand, and he was startled by how cold her fingers felt. "Does that mean you might know what's wrong with me?" Dr. Reeves opened the file and pulled out several pages of test results. "I'd like to run additional tests to confirm my suspicions, but based on your symptoms, blood work, and illness progression, I believe you may have systemic lupus erythematosus SLE." "Lupus?" David's voice cracked. "That's serious, isn't it?" "It can be, yes. Lupus is an autoimmune disease where the body's immune system attacks its own tissues and organs. It can affect the skin, joints, kidneys, heart, lungs, and brain. The symptoms you've been experiencing, joint pain, fatigue, rashes, cognitive issues, and abnormal blood work, aren't all consistent with lupus." Marie was very still, absorbing this information. "Is that why other doctors couldn't figure it out?" "Unfortunately, lupus is often called the great imitator because its symptoms can mimic many other conditions. It's also more common in women, particularly women of childbearing age. And there's still a tendency in medicine to dismiss women's pain as psychological rather than physical. I'm sorry it took so long for you to get proper evaluation." David felt sick. "Dr. Reeves, if my mother has had this for 3 years, what does that mean for her prognosis?" The doctor's expression grew more serious. "That depends on several factors. Lupus affects everyone differently, and early intervention is crucial for managing the disease and preventing organ damage. I'm concerned about some of your test results, Mrs. Coleman, particularly your kidney function and liver enzymes." "What kind of concerned?" Marie asked quietly. "I need to run more comprehensive tests, but there's evidence the disease may have already caused significant damage to your kidneys, and possibly your liver. This is called lupus nephritis, and it's one of the more serious complications." The room fell silent except for the tick of a clock on Dr. Reeves' desk. David stared at his mother, finally seeing her clearly for the first time in months. She wasn't a woman seeking attention or manipulating her family. She was a person who had been fighting a serious, potentially life-threatening disease while the people closest to her dismissed her pain as fabricated drama. "What happens now?" David managed to ask. "We need to get you started on treatment immediately," Dr. Reeves said to Marie. "I'm going to prescribe immunosuppressive medications to try to calm your immune system and reduce inflammation. We'll also need to monitor your kidney function very closely." Marie nodded slowly. "And if the kidneys are too damaged?" Dr. Reeves hesitated. "Let's focus on treatment for now. We'll have a clearer picture after we get your test results back." After scheduling follow-up appointments and getting prescriptions, David and Marie made their way back to the parking garage. Neither spoke until they were sitting in David's car. "Mom, I'm so sorry." The words came out in a rush, carrying months of suppressed guilt and regret. "I should have believed you. I should have been there for you." Marie reached over and took his hand. "David, you were hurt and angry about the divorce? I understand. Why, you know." David's voice was firm. "There's no excuse for what I did. You were sick, really sick, and instead of supporting you, I made it worse. I accused you of lying when you needed help the most." Tears streamed down both their faces. Marie squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. "I forgive you. I've already forgiven you. I just want us to be okay again." "We will be," David promised. "I'm going to help you fight this. Whatever you need, appointments, treatments, someone to advocate for you, I'll be there." Over the next 2 weeks, David threw himself into caring for his mother with the same intensity he'd once applied to avoiding her. He researched lupus extensively, learning about treatment options and prognosis. He accompanied her to every medical appointment, taking notes and asking questions when she was too tired to speak. The additional test results confirmed Dr. Reeves's diagnosis, but they also revealed the devastating extent of the damage. Marie's kidneys were functioning at less than 30% capacity, and her liver showed signs of significant inflammation. The disease had been attacking her body for 3 years while she pleaded for help from a medical system that failed her. "I want to be honest with you both," Dr. Reeves said during their follow-up appointment. "The kidney damage is extensive. We're going to try aggressive treatment, but Mrs. Coleman, you need to prepare for the possibility that you may need dialysis and eventually a kidney transplant." David felt the world tilt around him. "But she's going to be okay, right? People live with lupus. They get treatment and manage the disease." Dr. Reeves' expression was compassionate but grave. "David, your mother's case is quite advanced. The fact that she went without treatment for so long has allowed the disease to cause significant organ damage. We're going to do everything we can, but I want you both to understand the seriousness of the situation." That night, David sat with his mother in her small apartment, helping her organize medications and plan her treatment schedule. The woman who had once seemed so strong and independent now needed assistance with tasks as simple as opening prescription bottles. "David, I need to tell you something," Marie said as they sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd called him for help weeks earlier. "I've been working on some legal documents, my will, power of attorney, things like that." "Mom, don't talk like that. You're going to beat this." Marie smiled sadly. "I hope so. But I need to be realistic about what might happen. And David, I need you to know that even when you didn't believe me, even when you thought I was faking, I never stopped loving you. You're the best thing I ever did with my life." David broke down completely then, sobbing like the child he'd once been when she'd comforted him after his broken arm. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. You're here now," she whispered, stroking his hair. "That's what matters." But time was running out faster than either realized. The aggressive treatment Dr. Reeves prescribed was taking a toll on Marie's already weakened body. The medications that were supposed to help her immune system had left her vulnerable to infections, and her kidney function continued declining. On a Thursday morning in early November, Marie didn't answer David's daily check-in call. When he arrived at her apartment using his spare key, he found her collapsed in her bedroom, unconscious and barely breathing. The paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her, but David could see in their faces that the situation was grave. At the hospital, Dr. Reeves explained that Marie had gone into kidney failure, complicated by a severe infection her suppressed immune system couldn't fight. "We're doing everything we can," the doctor said, "but her body has been fighting this disease for too long. The damage is just too extensive." David spent the next 3 days at his mother's bedside, holding her hand and talking to her even though she remained unconscious. He told her about childhood memories, how proud he was to be her son, all the things he wished he'd said when she could hear him on Sunday morning. With November sun streaming through the hospital window, Marie Coleman quietly slipped away. David was holding her hand when she took her last breath, and in that moment, he felt the full weight of all the time they'd lost to his stubborn disbelief. The woman who had spent her final months fighting not just a devastating disease, but also the skepticism of everyone who should have supported her, was gone. And David was left to face the terrible truth that his mother had been right all along. She had been dying, and no one had believed her until it was too late. The law office of Brennan and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated Lincoln Park brownstone, tall windows offering views of bare November trees. David sat in the leather chair across from Eleanor Brennan's mahogany desk, still wearing the black suit from his mother's funeral 3 days earlier. The service had been David, his father Robert, a few of Marie's library colleagues, and Mrs. Chen from her apartment building. David had struggled through a eulogy that felt inadequate to capture the complexity of his relationship with his mother. The years of love followed by months of doubt, and the devastating realization that came too late. "I'm sorry for your loss, David," Eleanor said, her voice gentle but professional. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Your mother was very thorough in preparing her estate documents. She came to see me about 6 weeks ago." David nodded, his throat tight. 6 weeks ago, he had still been convinced his mother was faking her illness. While he was dismissing her pain as attention-seeking behavior, she had been preparing for her death. Before we begin with the formal reading, Eleanor continued, I need to give you something that arrived yesterday. She reached for a manila envelope on her desk, sealed and marked with the Northwestern Memorial Hospital logo. This came by certified mail, addressed to you, in care of this law office. David's hands trembled as he took the envelope. His name was written in his mother's careful handwriting across the front, along with instructions to be delivered to David Coleman after the reading of my will. Your mother left very specific instructions about that envelope, Eleanor explained. She said it was important that you receive it at this exact moment, not before. David set the envelope aside, though his curiosity burned. What did she leave me? Eleanor opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. Your mother's estate was modest, but she was very specific about how she wanted everything handled. Her savings account contained approximately $43,000, which she's left entirely to you, along with her personal possessions. David barely heard the financial details. $43,000 felt meaningless compared to the relationship he'd lost. Was there any other message? Any other letters? Actually, yes. Eleanor pulled out a sealed envelope with David's name in the same careful handwriting. She gave me this when she updated her will. She said it was crucial that you read this first, before opening the hospital envelope. David's heart pounded as he accepted the second envelope. Through the paper, he could feel several pages of his mother's pale blue stationery. Would you like some privacy? Eleanor asked kindly. Please. Eleanor stepped out, closing the door behind her. David sat alone in the quiet room, surrounded by law books and the faint smell of old leather. With shaking hands, he opened his mother's letter. My dearest David, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably feeling a mixture of grief and guilt that I wish I could spare you. I need you to know before anything else that I understand why you doubted me. I understand why it was hard to believe that your mother could be so sick and helpless. The divorce changed everything between us. And I know you felt like I was abandoning the family we'd built together, like I was trying to get attention or make everyone feel sorry for me. I don't blame you for thinking that way, but David, I need you to understand something I've never told you. I didn't leave your father because I stopped loving him. I left because I was already getting sick, and I knew something was terribly wrong with my body. Your father couldn't handle the idea that I might be seriously ill. Every time I mentioned a new symptom or tried to discuss my health concerns, he would get angry and accuse me of being dramatic. You're fine, Marie, he would say. You're just getting older. Everyone has aches and pains. When I suggested seeing a doctor, he told me I was being in that marriage, I would never get the medical care I needed. I would never be taken seriously. So I left, hoping that being on my own would give me the strength to fight for answers about what was happening to my body. I never wanted the divorce to come between you and me, but I understand why you sided with your father. From the outside, it probably looked like I was falling apart and making bad decisions, or the exhaustion, or even the fear of dying. The hardest part was watching the people I loved lose faith in me. Every time a doctor dismissed my symptoms, every time your father rolled his eyes at my complaints, every time you suggested that maybe it was all in my head, it made me feel smaller and more alone. But I want you to know that I never stopped believing that someday you would understand. I never stopped hoping that we would find our way back to each other. Even when you accused me of faking illness for attention, I held on to the knowledge that you were speaking from hurt and confusion, not malice. I kept detailed records of everything, every symptom, every doctor's visit, every test result, not just for medical purposes, but because I knew that someday someone would need proof that I wasn't making any of this up. I documented my illness because I hoped that when the truth finally came out, it might help you understand that I was telling the truth all along. David, I'm not writing this letter to make you feel guilty. I'm writing it to set you free from guilt. You are not responsible for my illness. You are not responsible for the medical system that failed me. You are not responsible for the fact that women, especially middle-aged women, are often not believed when they report serious symptoms. What you are responsible for is what happens next. You have the chance to learn from this experience to become the kind of person who believes people when they say they're in pain, who advocates for those who can't advocate for themselves, who understands that love sometimes means trusting people. Even when you can't understand their experience. In the envelope from the hospital, you'll find the official diagnosis that Dr. Reeves prepared for my medical records. She wanted to make sure there was comprehensive documentation of my condition. You are the most important person in my life. You are my greatest achievement, my deepest love, my proudest accomplishment. The fact that we had some difficult months at the end doesn't change the 28 years of joy you brought to my life before that. I forgive you for doubting me, and I need you to forgive yourself. Take the love we shared for most of your life and use it to build something beautiful going forward? Be the man I raised you to. Be compassionate, thoughtful, willing to admit when you're wrong and to learn from your mistakes. Take care of yourself, my darling boy, and remember that even though I'm gone, give to the woman you marry someday. I was saving it for when you found the right person. Jessica seems lovely. David, don't let fear keep you from the happiness you deserve. David was sobbing by the time he finished reading, his mother's words blurring through his tears. The letter was so completely, heartbreakingly like her, thoughtful, forgiving, focused on his well-being. Even in her final message, she had used her last bit of energy to try to spare him the guilt she knew he would carry. With trembling hands, he opened the hospital envelope. Inside were several pages of medical documents, all bearing the official Northwestern Memorial Hospital letterhead and Dr. Reeves' signature. The first page was a comprehensive diagnostic summary outlining in clinical detail the progression of Marie's systemic lupus erythematosus, the extent of the organ damage, and the timeline of her illness. But it was the second document that took David's breath away. It was a letter from Dr. Reeves, Marie Coleman, who passed away on November 15th from complications related to systemic lupus erythematosus, SLE, closing parenthesis. Mrs. Coleman first came to my attention through a referral from the Northwestern Memorial Emergency Department. At the time of our initial consultation, she presented with a 3-year history of symptoms consistent with advanced autoimmune disease. Her condition had been previously undiagnosed, despite multiple medical consultations. Upon review of her detailed symptom journal and medical records, it became clear that Mrs. Coleman had been suffering from SLE for approximately 3 years before receiving proper diagnosis and treatment. The delay in diagnosis allowed the disease to progress to advanced stages, resulting in lupus, nephritis, kidney involvement, and hepatic complications. Mrs. Coleman was an exceptionally well-informed patient who documented her symptoms meticulously and advocated tirelessly for proper medical evaluation. Her case represents a tragic example of how autoimmune diseases, particularly in middle-aged women, can be misdiagnosed or dismissed by the medical system. I want to state unequivocally that Mrs. Coleman's symptoms were real, serious, and progressive. Her illness was not psychological, fabricated, or exaggerated in any way. She was suffering from a legitimate, life-threatening medical condition that required immediate and aggressive treatment. The fact that Mrs. Coleman's illness coincided with major life changes, divorce may have contributed to initial skepticism about her symptoms, but I want to be absolutely clear that her medical condition was entirely separate from any emotional or psychological factors. SLE is a serious autoimmune disease with well-documented symptoms and progression patterns, all of which were present in Mrs. Coleman's case. I am providing this documentation at Mrs. Coleman's request, as she felt it was important for her family to have official medical validation of her condition. She was concerned that the delay in diagnosis and the skepticism she encountered from some quarters might lead to lasting questions about the legitimacy of her illness. Mrs. Coleman was a brave, intelligent woman who fought courageously against a devastating disease. She deserved better from our medical system, and she certainly deserved the support and belief of those closest to her during her final months. Sincerely, Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, MD, Chief of Rheumatology, Northwestern Memorial Hospital. David sat in the lawyer's office surrounded by the documentary evidence of his mother's suffering and his own failure to believe her. The official diagnoses, the detailed medical timeline, his mother's forgiving letter, it all painted a picture of a woman who had fought bravely against impossible odds while the people who should have supported her questioned her integrity. Eleanor Brennan returned to the office quietly, giving David time to compose himself. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. "She was telling the truth," David said, his voice broken. "She was really sick, and I didn't believe her." "David, your mother specifically asked me to tell you something if you seemed to be blaming yourself." Eleanor sat down across from him. She said, "Tell David that love isn't about being perfect. It's about learning from our mistakes and becoming better people because of them." David looked up at the lawyer, surprised. She said that she also said that she hoped her death would prevent other families from going through what you both experienced. She talked about wanting her story to help people understand the importance of believing each other, especially when it comes to health concerns. David nodded, wiping his eyes. "What do I do now? How do I live with knowing that I failed her when she needed me most?" Eleanor leaned forward. "You honor her memory by becoming the person she believed you could be. You use this experience to help others. You make sure that her suffering serves a purpose." David walked out of the law office that afternoon, carrying more than just legal documents and house keys. He carried the weight of hard-won wisdom, the burden of regret, and the responsibility to ensure that his mother's death would not be meaningless. That evening, he sat in Marie's empty apartment, surrounded by the possessions of a life cut short. He found his grandmother's ring exactly where his mother had said it would be, nestled in the velvet pouch in her jewelry box. As he held the small diamond ring, he thought about Jessica, about the future his mother had wanted him to embrace, about the possibility of building something beautiful from the ashes of his grief. On Marie's kitchen table, he found her symptom journals, dozens of pages documenting 3 years of pain, hope, disappointment, and determination. As he read through them, David began to understand the magnitude of his mother's courage. She had faced a devastating illness largely alone, fighting not just the disease itself, but also the skepticism of the medical system and her own family. David made a decision that night. He would not let his mother's story end with her death. He would find a way to honor her memory by advocating for others who were struggling to be heard, to be believed, to be taken seriously when they said something was wrong. He picked up his phone and called Jessica. "David, how are you holding up?" "I need to tell you about my mother," he said. "I need to tell you about what really happened and what I learned too late." And so, in the quiet of his mother's apartment, with her medical records spread out before him and her forgiveness echoing in his heart, David began to tell the story of Marie Coleman, a woman who had been right all along, who had fought bravely until the end, and who had loved her son enough to spare him the guilt that could have destroyed him. It was a story of illness and doubt, of medical gaslighting and family dysfunction, of love and regret and the terrible cost of disbelief. But most importantly, it was a story of forgiveness and the possibility of redemption, of learning from our worst mistakes and becoming better people because of them. Marie Coleman had spent her final months fighting for her life, while the people closest to her questioned her truth. But in death, she had given her son something precious, the chance to understand, to grow, and to ensure that her suffering would serve a purpose in preventing others from walking the same painful path. The rain began to fall outside Marie's apartment, windows drumming against the glass with the same intensity as the night she had called David for help. But this time the sound didn't seem ominous or lonely. This time it sounded like a benediction, like the tears of heaven washing clean the mistakes of the past and blessing the promise of a better future. David sat at his mother's kitchen table until dawn, reading her journals and letters, absorbing the lessons she had left behind. When the sun rose over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, he understood that his real life, the life his mother had hoped he would live, was just beginning.